Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome
Good evening
to
here.
hello. Welcome to the webinar, Linking Sustainability and Quality Education. It's an overview from ESD for 2030 regional meetings. It's a pleasure to have you here. My name is Alicia Jimenez. I work at the Earth Charter Center for Education for Sustainable Development at the University for Peace. So I'm in Costa Rica. This is where I am at now. It's a beautiful morning, 9 a.m. here in Costa Rica. And so now I encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat box. We have a nice group here today. So in the meantime that I'm sharing a little bit of what we're going to do today, I encourage you to do that in the chat. And for the meantime as well, if you can just we are recording now and we'll share the recording with you. If you can keep your mics closed if you're not speaking, so we really appreciate that. So this webinar is organized by the UNITWIN on UNITWIN Network on Education for Sustainable Development and Social Transformation. This is a network of UNESCO chairs which have in common their interest on research and training with a vision to transform educational institutions into places where social change for sustainable development can be lived and learned. So the Earth Charter Center for ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, is part of this network. So we've been responsible for putting this together in collaboration with our colleagues. So the aim of this event today, so what do we want to do, is to further the dialogue about education for sustainable development as an integral element of the Sustainable Development Goal on quality education. So many of us know is SDG 4, which is also a key enabler of all the other sustainable development goals. As most of you know, UNESCO is the agency in charge of coordinating the actions related to ESD and is now organizing a global network called ESD for 2030. So we're going to learn about that today. This network, the idea of this network is to support countries in the implementation of ESD through knowledge exchange and learning, through actions implementation, through collaboration, monitoring and evaluation. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to learn about the ESD 2030 network, especially the outcomes of the regional meetings that UNESCO organized in the past months to further collaboration and motivate actions around ESD. So I'm very curious to learn more about how ESD is being implemented in different regions, in different countries. So of course, this is just a 1.5 hour event, so there's no time to go too much in depth into all the details about what's happening in ESD in different countries, but we'll learn about some highlights of the different forms and actions around ESD in different cultural contexts. So I think that's very interesting for many of us. And very important, the main challenges and plans of implementations that are being proposed. So in addition, members of the UNITWIN Network on ESD and social transformation will reflect on how ESD is furthering the understanding and practice of quality education in the context of current global challenges. So before presenting our wonderful speakers of today, let me briefly mention to you that for the Earth Charter Center for ESD, is opening these type of spaces for dialogue and training around education and sustainability is of utmost importance. We've been doing this for more than 10 years, even 15 years or so. And so now my colleague Maria is going to share in the chat, so you have it there, links about some of the training opportunities. So for example, the online certificate on ESD that's starting in January this year. Some of you here in the audience have attended to this. Sorry, there was some interference here. Also resources such as books, podcasts, masterclasses, and so forth that we have available for you who are interested in deepening your knowledge, skills, and overall competences regarding ESD. And for all of those of you who also have the possibility and are interested in meeting face-to-face, we have the opportunity to do we're organizing a conference next year in April. So we're gonna as well talking about education, reimagining education for ecological civilization. So we're gonna share information there. So let me now introduce our great speakers of today. So we'll first hear from Mark Mans. So Mark Mans is program specialist with the section of Education for Sustainable Development. This is at the UNESCO headquarters in Paris. So I'm gonna read a little bit of his bio. He focuses on the implementation of the ESD for 2030 roadmap and framework. So this is an excellent person that we're gonna learn about this. We're interested. Particularly, he's supporting UNESCO member states in developing national strategies and initiatives to achieve the ESD for 2030 goals. And he's coordinating the ESD Net, the global network of countries and partner organizations that promote mutual learning, knowledge sharing, advocacy for and monitoring of ESD. So it was a pleasure for me to meet Mark Mans as the ESD 2030 regional meeting for Latin America and the Caribbean. That was in Chile this year in August. So thank you, Mark, for being here today. Then we'll hear from Catherine Cole. She's the executive coordinator at the UNESCO chair in reorienting education towards sustainability at York University in Toronto, Canada. Catherine is also the focal point for SDG 4 on quality education of the Higher Education and Research for Sustainable Development Global Cluster, led by the International Association of Universities. So she's been advocating for sustainability, being a purpose of education. Catherine's current field of interest is how ESD can enable achieving all the SDGs. This great research. We hope to hear about this research as well. So York University is part of the UNITWIN Network that I mentioned before. And well, I met Catherine a long time ago, I think. I don't even remember when, but it was great opportunity to work with her closely this year with her and Charles Hopkins during a fellowship granted by Leuphana University in Germany. So we worked on transdisciplinarity and ESD. So I think we're great to have her now here online, and we're working in this together. And now finally, Daniel Fisher. He is the UNESCO chair in Higher Education for Sustainable Development. He's also professor for sustainability education and communication at Leuphana University in Lüneburg in Germany. So Professor Fisher's research explores how more sustainable ways of living and consuming can be facilitated through communication and learning in ways that increase flexibility in learners and in an educational tradition, help them reshape their relations to the consumer societies that they have been born and cultured and socialized into the industrialized world. Areas of special interest to Professor Fisher are teacher education and experimentation with innovative teaching and learning practices like mindfulness, storytelling, or citizen science. So we'll learn about his work as well today. And actually, as well, met Daniel Fisher this year when I was in Leuphana University, and we are collaborating at the UNITWIN Network. Actually, Leuphana University is the coordinating university of this network. Okay, so we have three wonderful speakers of today, and the format of today's webinar is as follows. So we're going to hear from the speakers before, and if you have questions, all of you, the audience, we encourage you to write them in the chat box. So my colleague Amanda Bennett, who's here, she's going to collect your questions and comments. And at the end of hearing from the three of them, we'll open a space to learn about your questions and give the floor to some of you. So hope this is fine. This is a good plan. So we're starting now. And I want to give the floor to Mark Mans. So Mark, so I hope you can listen to you now, and you can share with us about the ESD for 2030 network, all these regional meetings, the process that led them, what are main accomplishments, challenges in this region. So hear from you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you for the introduction. Pleased to join this UNITWIN and Earth Charter webinar to talk a little bit more about our ESD for 2030 program, as UNITWIN and Earth Charter are key partner organizations belonging to our ESD net as we proceed. And pleased to join, of course, Katrin and Daniel on the panel. I'm going to share my screen. I'll give a quick presentation, as Alicia described, about a general overview of our ESD for 2030 program. Many of you are probably well aware, but for those of you who are new, that'll give you some background. And then moving into some of the examples, as Alicia said, of some of our activities this past year. So just allow me to get my screen set up. Is that visible?
Yes. Yes.
Is that clear? Great. So a lot of you have probably been following ESD for quite some time. You might have remembered the Global Action Program, the GAP, and before that, even the Decade on ESD. Our ESD for 2030 really is a continuation of these prior networks, activities, and efforts to push ESD to the mainstream. And this was sort of envisioned in this document here, this Education for Sustainable Development, a roadmap, which leads us towards ESD for 2030 program. It outlines, what we want to do in terms of addressing the 17 SDGs. As Alicia mentioned in the introduction, that ESD should be an enabler of all 17 SDGs. And really bringing it back to the theme of what Alicia mentioned for the webinar today, is tying this into the relevance and the quality of education. ESD really should be seen as the catalyst for defining quality and relevant education for all. So this document, you can see here, many of you probably have seen it. It's translated as well into various different languages. This is our foundation that we're moving forward to in terms of UNESCO, working with our member states and partners over the next less than a decade now, until 2030. How we do that is through a variety of different approaches and implementation tracks. I will talk more specifically today about these first two that are listed on the top left. So asking countries to take a lead in developing what we call a country initiative for ESD for 2030. In the past, we tried to mobilize a lot of partners and help to support. But now for this ESD for 2030, we're really trying to ask our member states, our UNESCO member states and the countries at the national level, to take ownership and to take leadership of mainstreaming and integrating ESD across all different levels of education. The way we're trying to do that as UNESCO and as a global partnership, we tried to establish the ESD net. And again, this is a continuation of efforts that had taken place through the GAP partnership and the decade before that, with many of our partners continuing on, yet trying to reach out to new partners and new membership organizations at the global, regional, and national levels. There are a few other issues, implementation means there. I won't talk in detail about those, but these can all be linked together as part of the effort to promote ESD for 2030. So more specifically, what exactly is this ESD net, or what we call this global network? Well, as Alicia mentioned, we have 4 objectives: knowledge sharing, mutual learning, collaboration, advocacy, and monitoring and evaluation of various ESD projects and programs. And we do that through two main groups of stakeholders. One is our member states, UNESCO member states or countries, where we're really trying to push for them to develop these country initiatives, and in that to build up a multi-partner stakeholder or working group or initiative, which involves not only, for example, a Ministry of Education, but it would involve other CSOs and NGOs working at the national levels, or community organizations, different municipalities working on ESD, different universities working at the national or local levels. These all should work together to push forward these national initiatives, these country initiatives. But then we also have to rely on the good work that's happening at the global and regional level from various partners and organizations. These can be youth organizations, other NGOs that work beyond boundaries, academic institutions, our UNESCO chairs, of course, and other international agencies. Yet, the ESDnet is also a place for individual participation and engagement. So educators at an individual level may be able to engage through various ESDnet activities that we would undertake through UNESCO, through our, either at Paris headquarters or through our regional offices when we have regional initiatives. Now, just to give you a little bit more what we're talking about when we're talking about these country initiatives. Over the last, since 2020, when we launched the roadmap, we've made a concerted effort to reach out to our stakeholders at the national level, ministries of education, for example, or key partners, to ensure that they develop some sort of an action plan at the national level that can mainstream ESD in the country across those 5 priority action areas of the roadmap. You know, policy level, learning environments, community organizations, youth engagement, and capacity development of teachers. So for these national initiatives, we work with our counterparts at the national level through ministries of education, as I said, to develop something or put something on paper that can have national scope, that builds on existing activities, and that will work or will act as a living document that can be reported or monitored on over the progress throughout until the year 2030. To date, as of today, we have 97 countries on board. 15 countries have a finalized version. What we term a finalized version means it's gone through a series of plans, consultations, and then has been approved by a national authority, a stakeholder. For example, a Ministry of Education, for example, would say, yes, we agree with this national action plan on ESD. So we have 15 countries who have done that. 32 are currently in process of doing that now. So they've at least started, and they've been revising or developing these action plans. And then another 50 have started or expressed interest. And sometimes that initial starting process takes a long time, and a lot of back and forth between UNESCO colleagues and our counterparts at the national level to really get them working on something at the national level. Here you can see the global representation of those 97 countries. So from the various different regions, 18 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, 20 countries from Europe and North America, 28 in Sub-Saharan Africa, 8 in the Arab region, and 23 in Asia and Pacific. And of course, these are all at varying different stages of implementation or developing these national action plans. Just to give you a few examples of some of those countries that have a finalized action plan and an example of how they have highlighted some of their activities. So for example, when we talk about the priority action areas in the ESD for 2030 roadmap, under the advancing policy section, for example, Lao PDR has highlighted their work on developing a national green growth strategy. So they've put the work into developing or having consultations around policy to develop this policy or to further strengthen this policy on national green growth. Similarly, in Germany, they've developed their national action plan on ESD through a variety of different consultations and working group arrangements. In Germany is a bit of a complicated, or one of the complicated countries because it's of a federal state. There are many of those, which takes a lot more work to get people to come together to develop one country initiative when we're talking about different federal states or different local entities coming together. So that's a great progress where they have been able to get together across a variety of different stakeholders and develop a policy on ESD. Other countries that focus on, for example, the learning environments priority. Cambodia has highlighted their Eco School program, where they're trying to implement or roll out various Eco School programs across many of their schools. And in Oman, in the Arab states, their emphasis was on further strengthening their science education and focusing on sustainability and environmental education through their national science programs. Botswana and some of the other, not only Botswana, but some of the other countries in Southern Africa have implemented a Sustainability Starts with Teachers Change project, which is a capacity building and awareness raising program really to support teachers on ESD, climate change education, and so on, building their capacity, building their awareness so that they can transform their learning, teaching and learning towards the ESD skills, competencies, and behaviors. As well, in the Republic of Korea, you can see there's an example where the Korean Teachers Organization works together with the schools to develop the ecological education program. I'll try to go through the last two quick, but hopefully these are resonating with you. Ireland really has a strong youth engagement component to their ESD initiative. They've highlighted several youth organizations that really take strong engagement and try to involve in the decision making in terms of what's happening in the classroom, what's happening at the policy level, and so on. Similarly, in Malawi, developing a national youth conference on ESD to engage the young people in that. And then you'll see a lot of places also focusing on community level actions. The efforts in St. Kitts and Nevis, this is really focused more around disaster risk reduction components, but that linkage between DRR and ESD is very strong in small island developing states. So it makes a lot of sense that St. Kitts and Nevis would focus their attention on developing community-led actions that can respond to the results of what's happening in terms of climate change and so on. And Japan has a strong effort focusing on their resource centers, ESD resource centers. They've developed several different resource centers located throughout the country, as well as integrating how cities can move forward in terms of encompassing all SDGs and moving forward to achieve all 17 SDGs. So in terms of specific ESDnet activities, since we launched the network in October of last year. So it's been over a year, just over a year now, since the ESDnet, officially branded ESDnet, has been running. We've had 4 learning webinars. One was a part of our launch webinar back in October. And then we've had 3 other learning webinars, which the design of these webinars were to engage our partner organizations, which would provide some practical, informative activities and advice to member states as well as to other partners and stakeholders. So we found these very interesting and very successful. We had more than 12 partner organizations join us over these learning webinars. We had people from Singapore, we had the IAU, we had an NGO from the Maldives, we had the world's largest lesson, and 3 different branches of the world WWF, Sweden, Kenya, and Greece, all shared their efforts in addressing ESD within their respective areas, whether it be global, regional, or at the national level. Then, in addition to those different learning webinars, we've also had regional meetings. And the purpose of these regional meetings were twofold. One, to really strengthen the support for our member states to further develop and integrate these national initiatives that they wanted, as well as to bring our partner organizations together. So it's a lot of mutual learning, knowledge sharing, and exploring ways that we can collaborate as a global network. And of course, these were started as regional networks. So we started with regional webinars. We organized these by region. So in Asia Pacific, they had 4 webinars. Latin America had 2 webinars. Africa had 2 webinars. Europe and North America had 2 webinars. And the Arab region, actually, sorry, Arab region has had one webinar, and they'll have another webinar coming up soon. These webinars, more than 10 of them, reached more than 1,000 people, 100 different member states from all across the region. Following that, we had in-person or in some cases hybrid meetings at the regional level. So the first one we had in Africa with over 75 people in 37 member states. And you can see some of the key takeaways there in terms of what the people were saying at the Africa meeting, where there was a need for more communication, advocacy, resource mobilization, a lot of talk about more peer-to-peer support. So this need to engage them, and that's where this network really can build to address some of these, where member states will be able to find some of our partner organizations to find some of that support, where they need advice and where they need more information. Then there was the Asia Pacific meeting in Bali with total 157. This was both in person and online, with 20 member states present. And they highlighted the value of bringing all of these different partners, countries and partners together to share these knowledges, different activities and different programs. And as a way to understand the differences, these regions are quite big and very different. So understanding some of the different issues, common opportunities that can take place. Europe, North America, we had in Paris in June with 68 people, both online and in person. A couple of the things you see there is the need for more monitoring or perhaps better monitoring or more consistent monitoring of these ESD plans. So that's something that us as a network, we can help focus on by having these national plans in place. We can come back to them every once in a while to ask, how are we doing? Where's our progress going? What has been the change or what are new gaps or new challenges that are arising? And lastly, the one that Alicia was mentioning, the Latin American Caribbean meeting in Santiago, also shared this desire for a common vision, shared plans across the region, even with the various differences between countries, but a common vision, common definitions of ESD that must go forward, and how to create those synergies. One thing I wanted to point out, and bringing this back to the off the top of the importance of the quality and relevance of education, is that ESD must go beyond this notion of just environmental education and climate change education, and really address a more holistic approach of the various skills, values, attitudes, and behaviors that are needed to ensure a quality and relevant education, and not just have this narrow focus on, for example, climate change. Of course, we do need that, but ESD can be much broader, and we can take a lot of different approaches to ensuring the quality and relevance of education. That leads us to where we're going next. So based on all of these regional engagements, we will be having a global meeting this December in Tokyo, Japan. We're in the process of sending out invitations to our partners and to our member states at the moment. And this will be another opportunity for the people who met at some of those regional meetings and some of our webinars to be able to take stock of where we're at in terms of implementing ESD for 2030 and where we can go forward for the next 2 years, 2024, 2025. What do we need to achieve, or how can we work together in terms of various activities, collaboration, and so on going forward into the future? Last slide, there's a few things there in terms of being able to follow us or stay in touch. We have a newsletter, we have a LinkedIn page, and of course we have a website. And of course, I'll be happy to share this slide with Alicia, and she can share it with the people who've joined today. Happy to answer anybody's questions. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to share our ESD for 2030 program and ESDnet. Thank you.
Wonderful, Mark. Thank you so much. That was a very good overview that gave us a glance of the whole world, and of course there's so much to learn, but I do like to see all this, what happened, all the actions, and well, in Latin America, what I can mention to you, maybe just because I was there, is that well, there were representatives for most of the ministries of education of the region, and there were so many interesting programs. So I was just happy. For example, I remember one of the Colombian case. They do have an education program that they linked the aspects of nonviolence, non-discrimination, and as well in the context of they are, promoting the restorative peace initiatives, and they're using that program because it's very important for the context and of promoting peace, including with environmental and climate action aspects. So I thought that was very important. That was a very good program that I learned, and there were many others. But I was quite optimistic after that meeting, because I saw like all these ministers of education actually getting this integral view that you were saying. It's not only one environmental focus, which is very important, of course, but I saw in many of the presentations seeing this integral connecting dots, which was very good. Okay, so now let's move on to Catherine Cole. So Catherine, as we heard, she's based in York, at York University. So Catherine, if you can also share with us about the challenges, opportunities for ESD. Now, Mark mentioned that the, not complex context of, for example, a federal system like Germany, and Canada has that, and that those systems. So maybe you can share a little bit about those contexts.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Most of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my take on these questions today. So yeah, my name is Catherine Cole. I identify with pronouns she and her, and I'm joining as a member of the York University community, Toronto, Canada. As part of our truth and reconciliation efforts, we are used to recognizing the lands that we are joining on. And today I'm joining from the traditional territories of the Orang Asli in the Greater Gombak area in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And yeah, first of all, it's really lovely to see so many familiar faces. Also, these people, they will actually have bedtime out here. They're all joining, so it's really lovely to see you all, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. But building on what Mark and Alicia have already brought up, I just want to offer my take. And first of all of these beautiful people that have been involved in ESD for a very long time, and most of you have, take up your right hand, wiggle it a little bit, and just clap on your shoulder, because you've totally deserved it. Because over the last years and decades, ESD has actually gained tremendous visibility and been picked up through the decade, through the Global Action Program, and again, building more actors getting involved in formal education, but also in the community, in other learning settings. And certainly the recognition, not being an integral element of quality education, education, but a key enabler of all other 16 SDGs. So the role of education and how we achieve clean water, how we achieve sustainable communities, the role of education really has a cross-cutting importance for the entire 2030 agenda. And certainly embedding ESD at all levels is the opportunity that we're facing to enhance the quality education, to have the competencies to live a meaningful life today and in the future. And I love the connection also of the 5 dimensions of the 2030 agenda. You know, we often get lost in details, but we have the 5 dimensions of the 2030 agenda as a people, prosperity, peace, partnership, and planet. And all of these beautifully align with ESD opportunities, as ESD competencies. So for people, you need knowledge production, you need critical thinking. If you look into prosperity, financial understanding, again, knowledge, and we need innovation. For peace, we need collaborative skills. We need to learn and to work together and also critically consider ourselves. We need to go for partnerships into, again, cooperative ways of working. And for the planet, we need to think holistically in systems. So these are tremendously important ESD skills that need to be part of a quality education if we want to look into the SDGs, the 17 SDGs as a whole, and into the 2030 agenda. And I have to give credit to Robert Ditham, who I learned that from in the when I was listening in the ESD for ESDnet meeting, regional meeting, Europe and North America. So with what we want to achieve with ESD as a key enabler and an integral element of quality education is actually, we want people to live a meaningful life in a world that we can't quite explain. We want them to deal with questions like what is happening when they're more attracted to artificial intelligence than to humans? How do they deal with these ongoing uncertainties and changes in the world that we can't quite foresee anymore? But also, and that goes much further and beyond the individual life, we want them to care about the others. We want for everyone that it matters, that something to another person that they might have never met and will never meet, in a place on earth that they might never see and might not have seen and will never see, that it matters. And that you use for the sustainability and the well-being of all as a compass for your own behavior, and take that all into account. That is the whole idea for ESD. Challenges are clearly there. First of all, we don't have a good vision of sustainable development. We talk about what we want to get away from. The world's going to go under. All negative messaging. And so we need some kind of positive vision. So we need to start working and reconsidering the vision that we're working towards to engage people, to gain traction to what we want to achieve. And yes, Mark has already mentioned it, see ESD in its whole holistic way, in all dimensions, not only looking at the easily understandable environmental dimension and the 3 R's, all of these simplistic light switches, but we need to understand the broad concept of sustainable development and look for a positive vision. We all need to understand better, and that is a challenge. We know often how to do the right thing, but for some reason we don't do it. And bridging this, making this sustainable development so important that it actually becomes a purpose of our education and the reason why we want to be further educated. That needs to happen, and is still a challenge. And there is and the ESD for 2030 roadmap mentions this in one sentence. It is still, ESD for some people is still vague. How does this whole vision translate to Tuesday at 9 in my classroom? And those are questions that we still need to answer, especially with the growing group of actors in the field. We need to take the time and keep explaining what ESD means and how ESD is locally applied and culturally appropriately applied in each classroom and in each education setting. We also need to pick up that ESD has been around for quite a long time, and people have missed the train. we have to start considering what actually happens if I now come forward and say, I'm sorry, I know I've been a secondary teacher, I've been a university professor, I've been in a community setting, I don't get it. I need to step back, I need to better understand it. So we also need to deal with that it might not be an open question anymore to ask what is ESD and deal with that. Those are just the challenges that we have. And the last one, and then I'm going to address two of the country initiatives. The last one is with the vision, also Mark had it up nicely, the overall building of a just and more sustainable world is the overall vision. But we also need to make sure, as ESD is now used to implement the and to advance the implementation of the 17 SDGs, that we're not getting reduced to ending up as an implementation tool for the SDGs and for the 2030 agenda. ESD is much broader. It has been along for much longer, and it will be around for much longer than the current action plan of the United Nations, the SDGs. And as I'm moving now, I have brought 3 slides, so you don't have to stare at me the whole time. I'm now gonna speak about 2 implementation settings. One is Canada, where I'm currently employed, and the second one will be Germany. 2 very challenging, as again was said already, challenging settings simply due to their federal system. And so education cannot just be rolled out in a national manner, but we need to take much more of an effort in order to unite and to respect that in Canada and also in Germany, education is a matter of the Bundesländer, the states, or of a matter of the provinces and territories, which means every problem or every education question in Canada multiplied by 13, in Germany multiplied by 16. These are the challenges that we are dealing with. And building on the idea of a country initiative, we just recently, under the leadership of the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, we've launched a call to bring together a pan-Canadian working group of experts that are in the field, also representing different parts of the country, but also different settings that people are in. And we're going to start working, and that's why products are still potentially. We're also going to develop our products, hopefully in a very, very collaborative way. How can we make the ESD for 2030 roadmap? And here you see the beautiful Berlin Declaration that builds on collaboration and partnership and learning to act, but also addresses certain elements in the formal curriculum. How can we translate this into a Canadian setting? And also at the same time as we are looking at certain products, recognize and acknowledge our specific Canadian elements, such as truth and reconciliation, a focus on gender and youth involvement, strong involvement in youth, which is traditional in Canada, but also work on anti-racism measures. So that is where we're at right now. We're just at the beginning, but just the conversation until we got here to have this call was extremely fruitful, and to verify and to localize what does ESD in our context actually mean. In the German setting, as I said, 16 times the problem, 16 Bundesländer, federal states. Germany has had a national platform for quite a while. Since 2017, they developed this approach through the Federal Ministry for Science and Research. So the idea of a country holding a responsibility as a member state within the United Nations system and having to translate this somehow into the national setting is, again, it's a problem that was very well known when UNESCO was even established. That's why the national commissions came into place in the first time, in the first place. The idea that you could not ever roll out education, science, culture, and later on communication information through just headquarters and field office and roll them out, that it would need national transmitters was recognized early. And in this case of the ESD implementation in Germany, the BMBF, the Federal Ministry for Science and Research, acted as this kind of transmitter, again under the leadership of the German National Commission, or Commission for UNESCO, and they developed a network approach of I believe it is six experts forums that are meeting on a regular basis, that are representing different levels of education, but also addressing local communities. And they took over their knowledge and their expertise from the ESD UN, or from the UN Decade on ESD. They had partner networks since earlier years. UN Decade was 2005, 2014. Then we had UN Global Action Program 15 to 19. So coming from the decade, they used the partner network, integrated during the Global Action Program into the platform, and really brought it all together. There's an annual Agenda Congress where people come together. Those networks meet on a regular basis. There's an award mechanism in it. And the latest focus, again, strengthening the visibility of ESD, looking at more collaboration. And from my experience, very little personal experience in Lower Saxony, there are so many ESD actors. So Germany is really fortunate with all of their actors. But sometimes those who work on ESD and digitalization, those who work with ESD and migration, they don't quite know each other. So there's a lot of there's more work to do in connecting the effort and the actors, and that is exactly what the German national platform is further gonna work on, based on their national action plan that they developed, again 2017 during the gap, and going now through the ESD for 2030 roadmap. In closing, I would just like to again focus what we have heard several times already, but the idea of ESD being a key enabler of all of the SDGs gives us, also for our country initiatives, the beautiful opportunity and argument that we can say, this is not just for education, because the role of education will play and is important for all the other 16 SDGs. So the idea of connecting it to the sustainability or sustainable development strategies of each country, and making the best out of ESD. And if we go back to the original four thrusts of ESD, they weren't limited to formal education. Looking at the access and retention and quality education. Yes, this is formal. Looking at reorienting education systems, transforming education systems, as is currently a big slogan also at the UN-wide initiative to transform societies. We need to transform education and really move beyond what we know. And that also includes this whole discussion on whole institution approaches. I'm currently at a university of a whole community approach, even going much further, but also, and that's the third point, public awareness and understanding, because especially in democracies, it is extremely important what people think and what they believe, as they will only keep governments, politicians, society influencers in good favor as long as they understand and they follow what they want. So educating communities, engaging with the public is really important. And the last aspect is training, to really address all aspects of training. So overall, I do believe there's a great chance we're on a good path forward. And now I hope that first of all, Daniel will further add to the discussion, and it's been a pleasure to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Wow, wonderful. So many. You took us in a journey of ideas, and out of interest of time, I'm not going to comment now, maybe later, but I want to give now the floor to Daniel, so we continue with this, with the dialogue that I'm sure now Daniel is going to react for what has been shared already, giving some insight as well about ESD, its connection to quality education. Just Catherine, just open the floor to that, and now let's hear from Daniel. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Elisa. I hope you can hear me well and see my presentation up. Great, excellent. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to contribute to this incredibly important global conversation. I'm really excited to see so many people in the room. So I try to deliver my input as quickly as possible to leave us as much time as possible for discussion afterwards. Alicia already introduced me. I'm with Leuphana University. We have the UNESCO Chair in Higher Education for Sustainable Development. And Alicia mentioned my interest in innovative pedagogies. So I thought I'd share briefly about some of the work we're doing in that space. But my focus will be on presenting to you what our UNITWIN network has actually been contributing to the debates and might contribute to these debates in the nearer future. So to start with our interest here in innovative pedagogies, I thought I'd give you just 3 quick snapshots, basically, of pedagogies that we are interested in when we explore ESD practice, basically. And these are the 3 ones that I would like to briefly talk about. One is to focus more on using narrative approaches to communicate about sustainable development. We do a lot of work on active learning methodologies, and a big share of our work in the past has also been on focusing on inner dimensions of learning. So just 3 quick slides on these 3 different pedagogies. So one project we worked on, for example, here at Leuphana was on using storytelling basically as a way to teach sustainability in the classroom. And we were interested in understanding how this approach, as compared to maybe the more information-based or more kind of cognitive, reflexive approach, how storytelling can also help us to reach out to other audiences that we typically do not reach. And that alludes to the point that Katrin made about a lively democracy and informed citizenship that might require us also to explore, as educators, novel approaches to reach those people that we typically do not reach. So this was an approach to test storytelling here. And one of the products was an online learning, self-learning modules that we developed. They are open educational resources, and I'm happy to share the link afterwards in the chat. So if you want to use these in your educational practices. A second approach that we piloted or did a lot of work on were active learning methodologies, specifically citizen science, because a lot of the ESD spirit of the ESD for 2030 agenda is about bridging these barriers between the formal education sector and the communities that those organizations and institutions are embedded in. So one approach that we piloted, looking at the critical domain of food waste, which is has been identified as a severe driver of carbon emissions in many countries around the world. We tackled this problem by having students conduct research into this topic. So we sent them home to collect food waste that occurs in their households, to measure it, to calculate the carbon emissions that result from that, to come back to class, share about that, aggregate the findings, then think about and do observations, why the food waste occurs, think about intervention strategies. So the students were really active researchers into their own live worlds, and that's what we refer to as active learning methodologies, and this is something we're very interested in. The last pedagogy is focusing more on inner dimensions of learning, as I would say, dare to say, a very neglected part within ESD. So the socio-emotional, the affective, the motivational dimensions of learning. So we used mindfulness-based interventions. We reworked them slightly together with mindfulness practitioners to focus on sustainability issues. And we tested them in interventions. And these are 2 toolkits that resulted from that. Again, open educational resources. Happy to share them with you. So the idea here really is to connect learners with their inner states and processes in a non-judgmental way, to first of all observe and acknowledge what it is that they are experiencing, and then to take it from there by adding kind of educational layers to this experience. So we are really interested in these kind of pedagogies. I hope that came across, and we're also interested in doing this in a very subject-specific way. So just flagging this guidebook as one such product, where we collected 57 examples of how sustainable consumption as an SDG 12 can be taught in higher education settings. So we collected these examples from more than 20 different countries across the world, and I'm happy to share a copy if you're interested in that. Again, I'll put it in the chat once I'm finished. So the main focus here, as I said, after this short introduction, is to also introduce you to the work of the UNITWIN Network. So UNESCO does not only have UNESCO chairs, UNESCO also supports UNITWIN networks, which are broader networks of UNESCO chairs. And both Katrin and Alicia, who spoke before, were a part of this UNITWIN network. And maybe the remarkable thing about this network is that it's the only one that is really focused so explicitly on education for sustainable development. It has been established in 2021. We have 6 founding partners, basically, and more than 30 partners kind of in the broader realm of this network. And yeah, this is a nice map that we always like to show to also illustrate kind of the geographical coverage of this network. So what this network tries to do is, and we discussed the vision of the network quite intensively recently, is we want to contribute to this broader agenda of transforming educational institutions into places where this kind of societal change that we're aiming and working for can be lived and learned. So that is, I think, a bold statement, but it is, I think, very much aligned with the spirit of the ESD for 2030 agenda, with a whole institution approach to create learning settings where we can not just passively learn, but actively live and practice these kind of changes that we want to see in the world. And our mission to do that, to deliver to that vision, is to incubate innovative research projects within our network, to involve intensively with policymakers and with policy processes, and of course also to impact the practice on the ground through evidence-based ESG engagement. So as a kind of contribution to our debate, I would, this is the last kind of input from my side, I would like to suggest something, and that is to focus also to draw on the expertise of sustainability science as a field, which is very connected, but often we do not have many opportunities to exchange between the education field and the sustainability science field. So a distinction that is very prominent in the field of sustainability science is to distinguish between different types of knowledges that we need for sustainability transformations. And that is, we need to understand the systems that we're operating in. Yeah, what are the causal effects? What are the loops? What are the influences and mechanisms? How these systems work? That is called systems knowledge. We need to envision the states that for the future that we consider desirable. So target knowledge, what should be achieved? Where do we want to go? And that is a separate form of knowledge. And then, of course, we need to bridge from the here to the then, from the current to the future. And that requires knowledge about transformation and transition strategies. So as a suggestion here to kind of apply these 3 different types of knowledges to our conversations about how ESD can contribute to quality education, I think a critical domain is to really understand where education policy, practice, and research stands. And webinars like that, like this year, are great opportunities to do that. But we can also conduct research on that, and we have conducted research on that in that network, or people involved in this network. Just to flag 2 research papers, for example, review papers by Charles Hopkins, who's also in the room here. Greetings. Was involved in to synthesize what sustainable development can contribute to quality education. And we recently conducted a separate review study to just understand what the field of teacher education looks like and how we can infuse ESD into this very important domain. I think if we are talking about leveraging ESD globally. So using reviews, using our research skills also to provide leverage our system knowledge on understanding what the status is of the field, but also what are opportunities and the constraints that we need to tackle and wrestle with as we in our efforts to leverage ESD. Target knowledge about desirable future states, that requires deep and intense and critical deliberation, I think, of the qualities and the roles of education that we need for the era of the Anthropocene. So, and that is being done, of course, and UNESCO is spearheading these conversations. We, for example, contributed also as UNESCO chairs a piece here to the report on humanistic futures of learning, where we positioned sustainability not just as an instrumental tool to achieve quality education, however defined, but to redefine it as a purpose on the new path of learning for the future. So and also there's another interesting piece flagged down here to the right, which engages very critically with the notion of transgressive learning, how we can understand the resistance that we are going to face when we're trying to push for sustainability, and how we can infuse that into learning settings. So I think the conversations about target knowledge we need these critical conversations, and we cannot assume that we have a kind of linear progression here of knowledge, that something that we have agreed on in the past is still valid today. We have new times, new challenges, so these are ongoing conversations that are very much needed, also on the roads of education. As Katrin said, it's to not use it only or conceive of it only as an instrument or tool for other goals. The last thing is how to bridge from the here to the then, from the current to the future, desirable futures. So really focusing on transformation knowledge. And recent work that we've done in this network really tried to unpack the political dimension in ESD. So we developed curricular courses that we ran in different higher education institutions across the globe in the Politics for Future project, where we engaged students with questions about the political dimensions in education for sustainable development. Students had then also the opportunity to share intercultural perspectives on these topics, to really strengthen this area, which is critical, I think, when we are talking about transformative education, not just in an individual perspective of individuals transforming, but in a broader sense of transforming society, where we will need to wrestle with these kinds of political battles. So, and as a last point, as an outlook maybe to the future, a current research project that we are shaping up in the network is trying to look at, again, schools, higher education institutions more generally as micro-political sites. So within these institutions, we do have initiatives, interventions to work towards, for example, the implementation of a whole institution approach. And here too, people who are pushing for these kind of changes are facing resistance and opposition. And how do we prepare and equip these leaders to navigate these challenges, to overcome these challenges, and to implement ESD successfully, and to convince and persuade also others? That is kind of at the core of this project that we are, as I said, shaping up currently. So really focusing on leadership skills in navigating institutional change as a site of a micro-political site, basically of navigating resistance. So I hope these snapshots gave an idea of what this network is about, and how our UNITWIN network on ESD and societal transformation also contributes to the broader ESD for 2030 agenda. And I'm very much looking forward to our conversation now. So thank you again for the opportunity to share today.
Thank you, Daniel. That was amazing. That was great, and actually gave me so many food for thought, especially what you were saying on this type of knowledge, system knowledge, target knowledge, and transformative knowledge. It helped me a lot, actually. It's very good, very good. But I don't want to take time from the audience. I don't want to be the one speaking too much. So I do have many comments, but now is the time for you to voice some of your comments, questions. And for that, Amanda, if you're there, I can give you the floor, Amanda. So can you guide us a little bit on what type of comments, or maybe you can call someone who has been giving asking a question. So Amanda, let us know. Amanda, let me introduce Amanda Bennett. She works with me. She's program manager and the youth coordinator. And Amanda has been dealing with a wonderful course that we have, the Leadership, Sustainability, and Ethics with youth. So it's part of the ESD efforts that we do with youth and non-formal education. But okay, Amanda, where are you?
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists and everyone participating in the chat. Super active. I we had a comment from Omar Farouque, who's joining us from Bangladesh. So Omar, if you're still around and want to ask your question out loud, we will go to you next. And then Daniel already answered part of this, but maybe someone else would like to join in expanding on this. But Isabel Toman from IAU asked, what would you consider the main challenge or constraint for ESD at universities? Talking also about systems transformation. So Daniel, would you like to expand on what you were saying about resistance and opposition?
Yeah, and thanks for that question, Isabel. We've been in touch before, so this doesn't come as a surprise. But it's a good question to also look at. Of course, to consider higher education institutions. So indeed, I think in some ways, higher education institutions might even be more difficult to navigate than schools, for example, or secondary or primary schools. But I think they have a really critical role to play in these conversations, and it cannot be overestimated. Basically, what they might, what their potential basically to contribute to these conversations. So I would say that dealing with resistance is, or maybe there's one specific thing that I would flag just as a quick response to that question. I think a great opportunity that higher education institutions offer comes with a GET priority area of empowering learners. So one area of work that we're doing here is to work with students in higher education to, for example, challenge very deeply ingrained but very problematic mechanisms that we have in higher education, namely assessment procedures. So this is one domain that I think is really impeding a lot of progress and a lot of autonomy, a lot of innovation, in the sense that we still stick to this very hierarchical, very transmissive, very reproductive kind of system of testing students on certain knowledges. So this, I think, is a domain where higher education institutions can actually lead the conversation, maybe much more better equipped than other educational institutions. So this is an area that we are, for example, trying to explore, and where we would really love to connect with others working in the same domain.
Maybe I can.
Yeah,
sorry.
Thank you,
Maybe
Catherine.
I can build on what Daniel has already said, also with regard to the knowledge piece, because that is also a question that as higher education and our teaching and our research, we can ask ourselves how much we're really replicating the knowledge and how it's going on, not only in, we often look in ESD into the specific field of ESD, but it goes much further, and we need to reconsider the way we're producing knowledge in all other disciplines. We need to also see what is our role as universities. I mean, we often one hears the teaching and learning, the research, and the community service, but how much do we actually get influenced by the community service, or is it just an add-on that we're delivering to the community to get the corporate social responsibility star in whatever ranking? Or how much are we really taking the concepts and the issues of the community globally and locally that are there, and taking them on and working with the communities and making this our way of dealing as with sustainability challenges as a university, and go much more beyond our comfort zone in the way we're working? And how much do we really try to engage in innovative thinking that might fail? You know, how many opportunities do we have as academics in universities? How many opportunities do we really have to fail when we are on research grants? How many times do you want to fail with a feasibility study in a research grant? And how much is really opportunity to test the real life labs, and how much do we dare? And I think universities here can go out much further and create that real life learning on the spot, but also that inherent responsibility in us, in our institutions, to connect with the community and serve the community. And that alone would also bring the transdisciplinary case into action, and from at all levels, from students into a university leadership. Thank you.
Are there more questions, Amanda? Yeah, I think
Yes.
so.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Alicia. Omar, would you like to ask your question? I saw.
Thank you. So hello, my name is Omar Farooq, a 17-year-old boy from Bangladesh, and I'm one of the nominees on prestigious International Peace Prize, Children's Peace Prize 2023. So I'm the founder and president of Project Omna, which is an upcoming mobile app project focused on children's mental health and child rights globally. So I work to ensure young people's rights globally. So on behalf of children, I ask, how can we ensure that all children have access to quality education that is linked to sustainability, so that they can inherit a healthy and just planet? How can we ensure that quality education for all children and youth empowers them to become active agents of change for a sustainable future? Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Mark, would you like to start with this one?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Omar, for your question. Much appreciated. Thank you for joining us as well. Yes, a very pertinent, very difficult question for the youth and for all of us. Engagement of multiple partners. So youth, there needs to be a space for youth to step up, to enjoy, to join, to engage, but that also needs participation and recognition from adults leading to provide that space for them. So through what some of the activities we've discussed here today is trying to provide an environment where multiple stakeholders, multiple partners, people from the community, people from governments, people from private sector, people from all sorts of organizations can join together to, in a space like this, to talk about what is needed in terms of quality and relevant education and how to address that together. More spaces sort of like this, working together in concert between various different groups. That's the only way I think that we can ensure that we're going to have a realistic or transformative approach to addressing quality education for all, for the youth going forward. Much easier to say than to do, of course, Omar, but I think we need to provide more spaces like this where all can participate. Thank you. Catherine or Danielle may want to join as well. And Alicia, of course.
It's a wonderful question. It helps us to as well do this system, target, and transformative knowledge, all these competencies, because it cannot happen only with the government. We have to all be join and see what we can do in the specific, in the context. Catherine, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just building on again, coming back to ESD, the access and retention and quality education, it's first and foremost the condition to even consider any kind of quality education. And so that's kind of it does not get said often enough, I believe, but that we cannot take it for granted that the access is there, and that we need to keep emphasizing the point. So I'm glad that Omar brought that case forward. And I do believe with the rise in technology that we might be able in transforming our thinking of education can only be delivered in certain national settings or regional settings, but with technology we're actually in a much better position and can reconsider our broader systems approach, our global systems approach to education. So there's much to do, and I'm really happy that he brought that forward. Yeah, thanks.
More questions, Amanda? Do you think we have a little bit more time?
Okay, I'll read. There are 3 questions, and I can read, and so they're pretty easy to follow. So Jody Birdman wants to know, how do you reconcile the pacing of modern universities in which courses and responsibilities compete for students and staff attention in the much needed practice of mindfulness? So we have that challenge of competing between the responsibilities, the academic responsibilities, and mindfulness. And Catherine Natchway from Germany, Earth Charter Young Leader, she's saying thank you for the presentations, thank you for connecting the dots for sustainable transformations and transitions. And she said she didn't hear about the link between ESD and climate entrepreneurship. So if anyone would like to expand on that.
Who wants to open? Who wants to start? Well, there was one in terms of, I don't know, Daniel, if you want to say something regarding the mindfulness.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you also, Jody, for that question. I answered it briefly in the chat, and I don't want to repeat myself, but I think, really the pressure also comes from intensified and increasingly micro managerial approaches to assessment, where students have to deliver every week, and it's more about production than really meaningful engagement. So I think that's still, I would like to think of assessment as a way to approach it. Maybe to the other question about climate entrepreneurship, because it's a great question, and I think a 1.5-hour seminar always runs the risk at neglecting certain areas or approaches, of course. But maybe I would respond to that by, first of all, agreeing with you that entrepreneurial education is very critical, and many of the innovations we see today that provides solutions or test solutions come from people from the younger generation who have this kind of entrepreneurial spirit to not just think of themselves as individuals who can do lifestyle changes, but who also can contribute as professionals to developing these novel solutions. So in general, I think in ESD, we should try to not fall into the old trap of just adding kind of or fighting over kind of the bits and pieces that should go into it or that should fall out, but we should think about everything we have at hands that can help us to bridge from the here to the now to the then. What I suggested with systems knowledge and transformation knowledge and target knowledge, and I think entrepreneurial education and thinking has a lot to offer here, and is of critical importance. So thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you, Daniel. And the last one, which we know this could be another webinar as well. So Deepika Singh said, besides higher education, what plans and practices do you have for non-formal ESD? Do you have any tools developed already for non-formal education for sustainable development? And this is for any of the panelists.
Any of you? Non-formal ed, who wants to say? I don't know, Mark, do you want to say something regarding to this?
Yes, the short answer is I'll have to check. Off the top of my head, I don't have tools on specifically on non-formal ESD programs and practices, but we do know there's a lot of work in our countries, for example, as I mentioned, where they're doing a lot of work on community engagement. So a lot of our countries do have local level actions they've set up either with local organizations to prepare how to engage communities, deliver, for example, capacity building to community leaders or community organizations to further strengthen ESD. But on a specific tool, I can't share with you immediately. But yes, we do work with different CSOs and with our country level actors to develop these sorts of engagements and in community level and non-formal and informal education settings.
But I was thinking about the case in Japan. I was thinking about that because I thought that was very interesting. In Japan, they're working SDGs Future City Plan and with ESD Resource Center. So maybe that's something that has to be further, like this, working with learning cities that I know.
Exactly. I was just going to mention the same thing, Alicia. Yes, working with our UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, of course, we have the Learning Cities programs, which would be able to, you might be able to find their links on the website to talk about the different programs and projects that they do for their various cities throughout there, where they highlight how to engage different cities and different organizations within a city to further strengthen SDG implementation.
Yeah. And the regional the global network of regional centers of expertise on ESD, on education for sustainable development, they have a number of toolkits available. This is a network that focuses on bringing the community issues together with the educators, more than 180 centers around the world. So there is also quite a number of toolkits, etc., available.
Yeah, and actually Miriam is mentioning here in the chat, if you want to check that ESD learning training for youth. So that's a resource that is there available and is to use in the non-formal education, which is, you have that guide there. So that's great. Okay, thank you. I saw that in the question and answer, there's one from Isabel Toman and also Robert Didham. Is Robert still here? Well, and Isabel, I can see her here, but there was one for Catherine. If you could please share an example of what we just said about understanding of ESD work between the university and collaboration with local community, innovative opportunities, real lifelong learning outside school. So maybe this connects as well with what we were just saying, right? Like this understanding the importance of collaborating and whole institution approaches, which helps to connect universities with the local communities. But I don't know if Isabel, I mean, if Catherine, if you want to mention, if there's one example that comes to mind.
Just very, very briefly, that one comes to mind at the university where I'm currently at. There's an USRA in action. It means so much like society, family in action, and every student has to contribute to community work, otherwise they can't graduate. And they need to, but they don't just come and offer what they think is best for the community, but really have to learn to work with the communities throughout the 4 years of their undergraduate studies. And I do think that's a good way of connecting from every discipline, working interdisciplinary amongst the students and going that. But maybe Daniel has another example that's just a very brief one that I can offer.
Yeah, I can just share about a very brief example of non-formal education ESD that I really liked, because I wish I had thought of that myself. But there was a great project here in Germany that worked with the youth hostels as sites of non-formal learning, where lots of young learners and different groups from across the world come together, for more recreational purposes, but there's always space, for outside the program. So they really created great offerings in a non-formal setting to implement ESD and reach out to very different target audiences. So I'll see if I can find a link to put in the chat.
That's great. And okay, I think, well, Robert is here. Robert is also part of they have a UNESCO network, and I think we also participate in that. So this is wonderful. It's a network of networks on sustainable consumption. Sustainable lifestyles, education, which is great. So I don't know, Robert, if you want to open your mic, but he was talking about quality education. Robert, do you want to mention something? And it's good to hear.
Thanks, and thanks to all the presenters. I was just I brought up, it used to be that quality education, especially in more of the development education field, was talked about in relation to the 4 A's: availability, accessibility, acceptability, and adaptability. You see that in the mandate for the special rapporteur on the right to education. And I think it's important because this is a language that speaks to wider development education and to ministries of education that is maybe more pertinent sometimes to certain thinking about education. But we have a place here in ESD, and I wonder if you could reflect on specifically how does ESD support improvements in the acceptability and adaptability of education?
Good. Acceptability and adaptability. I don't know if any of you want to say. Daniel, if you want to say something, or Mark, Catherine. I can see in the adaptability aspect, right? Because ESD is actually focused on the context that we are, and it helps us, you know, promoting these competences that help us to be able to act and understand and regarding the complex context that we are living now. So I can see that acceptability, maybe some of the things that Daniel was saying, it can help to say like this part of the transformative knowledge that is needed. But I don't know if that's any of you want to say something regarding this.
Well, I like the overall approach of also thinking how we sound to others, like the whole idea of making ESD available to those who are not naturally in education or acquainted with education language. So looking at how do we communicate about ESD and how do we make it available beyond our own little world of educators and those who are active in the community in education. So I find that particularly interesting. So thank you for the comment, Robert. It's not really an answer. It's just an appreciation for the perspective that you just gave me. Thanks.
Okay, I don't know, more reactions. Okay, but thank you. Yeah, that was, I also, it's a good language to keep in mind. And okay, so I think we do have some 3 minutes, 4 minutes, hopefully. So to conclude this webinar, I really appreciate Mark, Catherine, Daniel, for all your inputs. I wouldn't do justice if I tried to do a summary. I myself took a lot of notes and learned a lot. And I'm living with a sense of sort of optimism that this transformation of education systems is there's a ground. There is like the seeds have been planted, and we just need to continue to generate the conditions for all of this. So in the educators, with all these capacity building opportunities that we have to do with the work with youth, the work at the policy level, etc. So maybe I can ask you, Mark, Catherine, Daniel, if you have like a motivational word to conclude, to say like now we are envisioning a work ahead that hopefully doesn't limit what Catherine just said, and is a strong message, not limit only to 2030, but we know that education has to be evolving, and as it has been in the past, to address our present challenges. And so maybe a motivational word of what is coming ahead. What do we envision and with ESD and this transformative education initiatives that are happening now? So maybe start with Mark, then Catherine and Daniel, and we conclude.
Thank you, Alicia. Yes, once again, thank you for giving us the floor today, and thank you for everybody for joining to listen in. Yeah, I think maybe just to reflect on the journey that we've had, at least how I've been involved in working with countries and working with the various member or partner organizations and members of our ESD net. I was surprised at each sort of webinar or regional meeting of deepening knowledge of what ESD is. A lot of cases, when we started talking to the countries in the process, we would ask them, tell us a little bit about what activities you're doing in terms of ESD, and they might have said nothing. But then you ask them a few more prodding questions, and then they finally realize, actually they're doing a lot. There's a lot of activities going on in countries, and they've never known it called as ESD. And so putting this sort of these three words on top of all these interrelated, or sometimes the people don't see them as related, but they're all interrelated because it's all based on SDGs. But bringing this vision, this coherent vision of what ESD is to them, and seeing that light bulb tick in their face, and think, you know what, actually, yes, we can develop a country initiative, or we can develop some sort of national action plan. I think this has been the positive light, moving from where we started a couple of years ago with these country initiatives and the ESD net to where we are now, and it bodes well for the future as we move forward. As we say, Katrin talked about the hard work and the heavy lifting that has just gotten to a starting point in Canada, where it's such a huge country and you have to engage so many different partners and stakeholders that are responsible for so many different areas. So I'm encouraged to know that we're moving together, moving forward together for a common vision, common goal to strengthen the quality of education. Thank you.
Katrin?
Yeah, I'd like to offer a story from my week on Monday afternoon. I sat in a graduate course on Islamic education, and it was the first introductory first lesson of this, or first lecture of the semester. And the professor that is from Malaysia, has always taught in Malaysia. He used the what is ESD explanation by the German Commission for UNESCO as his explanation. And it was there's a YouTube video, What is ESD, that was produced I think in 2019 or in 2020, right after the roadmap was as formally launched, still before the Berlin conference. But the whole idea that also the materials that we put out there, that they really travel, and they don't have any connection here to the German Commission. It was just they found the material and they used it, and he made that the center point of his first lecture. So that was another encouragement, that we're not aware where the message travels, but there's so many more that are actually aware of it. And so that I found that extremely motivating, sitting so far away from Germany and hearing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrin. And Daniel?
Yeah, thank you also for the opportunity to have the last word. So I think maybe my motivating thought for years has been to really speak to the sustainability discourse as an educator, and to acknowledge, to kind of position education not just as a tool. We have said that several times, but what does it mean if it's not just a tool? And what gives me courage and strength is, and motivation and hope is, that we've come such a long way that, as Katrin said, it's now identified as a key enabler of all SDGs. And we have the 2030 kind of post-2030 agenda discussions on the horizon. And my hope is that we will be able to even further strengthen the role of education in this. And to give you just a quote that really that I feel very strongly about, is to not just ask what kind of education we need to achieve certain sustainability outcomes, but to flip the question around. So what kind of a society does someone working on their education actually need? And I think that is a question that we should bring to the conversations as educators. So thanks for that.
Wonderful. And thank all of you as well for your wonderful comments and questions. And I do like that change of question that Daniel is saying for us to conclude. Let's envision, let's try to be hopeful. We know, sometimes we see things that maybe we don't want to see, but if we work, putting these values and principles into practice, I think we can see these societies happening, and in the way, in the different realms that we can work, so we can make it happen. So yes, thank you so much. We all do wonderful work. So I also like what Catherine said, like congrats to all of us for the work that we do. We continue, and we'll keep inviting you to other events, other webinars as well in this UNITWIN Network, and that we're doing in collaboration with UNESCO. And Mark, I hope you have a good, very good global meeting there in Japan. We may ask you to report us, not report, sorry, but we'll invite you to share with us as well what happened. So maybe some people here will be attending, and hope you can bring as well this motivation to this global ESD network meeting. Okay, so have a good day, afternoon, night, and we'll hopefully keep in touch in social media and other means. Bye.